Good morning, everybody. My name is Coach Michael Vassil. I'm the offensive line coach at Becker College. I'm coming here today to talk to you guys about offensive line play. Today, we're going to focus solely on the philosophy, and with philosophy, we're talking about the approach I take to building an offensive line room, building an offensive line community. And then we're going to talk about our fundamentals. These are things that no matter where I've been, we always focus on with the offensive line. Before we get rolling, I just want to give you a little bit about my experience. I'm a former offensive line athlete, played it from middle school all the way through college. Was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to play college football at North Carolina State University. It's a D1 school here in North Carolina. I am always available to talk ball. I love doing it. Offensive line is my first love and my passion. If anytime you want to connect with me to talk about it, you can always email me. My email is here on the screen. It's vassilma57@gmail.com. That's my personal email. I will check it at least 2 or 3 times daily, if not more sometimes. Or if you have Twitter, prefer to reach out to me via Twitter, you can hit me up at Coach Vassil. I was very fortunate that there's not a lot of Coach Vassils in the world, so I didn't have to go crazy with my Twitter handle. Okay? So let's get this thing rolling and get this thing started. All right? Our offensive line philosophy, what shapes my coaching, my teaching process, how I personally view to do it, and the offensive line meeting room. My teaching philosophy gets broken down into 2 sections, a physical approach and a mental approach. With our physical approach, the first thing we're looking at is we talk about, and I teach physically about the 8 angles of football. The 8 angles of football, guys, are just like looking at a compass on a map. Okay, you got your north, your south, your east, your west, your northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. If we look at all the movement patterns of offensive linemen on the field, an offensive lineman will travel on one of those 8 angles on every single play. Now, sometimes that angle looks just like it would on a compass, but sometimes it's a little bit skewed one way or the other. The angles are not finite. Okay, so that's what we keep that in mind. But an offensive lineman will move on one of those 8 angles every single play that he takes on the football field. Another thing that we subscribe to within our physical approach is we want to generate forceful and powerful movements. Okay? How we do this is we learn to travel on our angles via driving off our opposite leg. What we're doing with this is we're going to create force through the ground. We do not define our O-line athletes by you have to get this many steps in order to accomplish this block, because that's not necessarily how it should be done. I can't tell you that every time it should take you exactly 3 movements to get to that defensive lineman, or it should take 6 movements to get to that linebacker. I can't, because on every play, something different is going to happen. So rather than focus on you got to get this many steps down before this happens, I want us to focus on generating forceful and powerful movement so that when we get to where we're going, we can deliver a blow and be violent. Okay, we also subscribe to attacking half a man. When I first started out coaching football at the high school level, which was going on 11 years ago, the job that I took was a school that was in its first year of varsity. My average offensive lineman weighed 160 pounds. I was in the boonies of North Carolina, where kids would miss football practice, and I'm talking about all but 5 kids on the football team would miss practice because it was the opening weekend or the opening day of rifle season to shoot ducks. So to say the minimum, I was not dealing with all-world, all-star offensive lineman, D1 guy caliber offensive lineman. So I had to find something to use to be able to teach these guys that wasn't just the old school big man head-on collision football. All right. So subscribing to angles, subscribing to generating forceful and powerful movements, the next piece that we focus on in teaching is we want to find optimal body positioning, or a term I use a lot, universal leverage, when we go to execute blocks. Okay? What that means to me is my body is in an optimal position to be able to strike with force, generate power, but more importantly, universally, my body is in a position to keep that defender from getting to my ball carrier, getting to my quarterback. That's why a lot of times you'll hear me, or my guys will hear me talk about universal leverage. Both the idea of having having my strength leverage, but also having my body leverage on a defender. The other piece that comes with that is using the pressure of the defender to ensure that we maintain that optimal body position and use that optimal leverage throughout a play. The last thing I subscribe to is position-based conditioning. What I try to instill in my guys is that everything we do in a drill, we treat it like a game situation. So we're going to be up tempo. I want high bursts of energy. I want excitement. I want high bursts of energy. I want to get a lot of reps in to help us A, get better, but B, get into playing shape. Because for an offensive lineman, putting them on the line and running gassers over and over again, the only thing you're doing is you're going to see if little Timmy has a heart attack. Or Johnny, or, you see the fact that Johnny is not a world-class sprinter and is not built for long-distance running. All right. So we talked about our physical approach. Now we go to our mental approach. The first one up here is something that has taken me a lot of time to get better at, and usually is the hardest part of the mental approach to the philosophy I bring into the offensive line. No passive verbage. Now, it might sound crazy, but littered within offensive line coaching rooms across the world, there is plenty of passive verbiage being used. What this means is we're subconsciously telling our offensive linemen to not be physical. And then if that offensive lineman goes out and he's not as physical as we wanted him to be on the play, how can we yell at him? Because we were the ones that told him to do the action passively. So the passive verbiage that I try to eliminate with my groups is words like stepping, words like just get there, phrases like just get there, things of that nature. And I replace them with drive, own your angles, drive through your defender, be violent. Don't go hit him, be violent. Things of that nature, because it's been proven that mentally stimulating your guys is just as important as getting him to lift all them weights and getting him to, do all that work physically. You've got to mentally prepare your guys as well. So that's why we subscribe to no passive verbiage. Our O-line and our coaches' mentality with one another. So in other words, how the O-line is towards coach and how I am towards my O-lineman. I believe and I subscribe to an acronym that I don't know if I made it up or it just happened this way. But I subscribe to the boat philosophy. And the boat philosophy, how I tell my guys, we're all in this boat together. The boat philosophy stands for balance, open, available, and trusting or truthfulness with each other. Okay? This builds us together. This builds us and helps us become a unit. Having balance, knowing when to have some fun, knowing, hey, morale's low. Let's have some fun, guys. Come on. Let's do something. Let's do something stupid for a minute to have some fun. Or being open with one another. I tell my guys all the time, I'm not perfect. I'm very fallible as a human being. I can be wrong. So if I say something that's wrong, call me out on it. Tell me I'm wrong. That way I can correct it. Because to me, the best leaders are ones that lead by example, not the guy that sits there, wags his finger at you and says, do as I say, not as I do, because we got plenty of those in the world. Available. We're available for each other. My guys are always available for one of their brothers. They're having a hard time. They're with them. But on top of that, I'm always available to my players. They all have my cell phone. They know they can call me, text me if they've got problems, and we talk it out. And then trusting or truthful. We shoot each other straight. There's no BS. There's no politics. Again, it ties in with the open concept a little bit, being open with each other. We do all this, like I said, because we want to build ourselves up. We want to help ourselves get better, and we want to become a more tight, cohesive unit. But two, we do this because I want to build love between myself and my players. I don't want respect or fear. When I was one of my first interviews for a coaching job, coach asked me if you want to be respected or feared, and I said neither. I want to be loved. Respect and fear both come with a limitation from who you respect or who you love. Something I talk about all the time with guys I used to play with. Man, I respected the hell out of Coach, but you know what? There was a limitation to how far I would go. Or, man, I was afraid Coach was going to blow. I was always afraid that Coach was going to restart the conditioning. I hated that guy. I feared him. There was definitely a limit to how far it would go. But with love, there's never that limit. If someone loves you, they're going to push themselves to the breaking point and then go past that breaking point for you every time. I always tell people to think about somebody in your family you love. For me, it's my wife, my mom, my dad, and my dogs. There's nothing I wouldn't do for anybody I just listed. I'll catch a case, and one of my kids said, Coach, you catch a case for him? I said, yeah, I'll catch a case for him. Just like I'd catch a case for them. Because we build love in our O-line room. We build love in our O-line philosophy. All right. So the last point of our mental approach is how myself and my O-line, we look at the opposition. It's a fun little acronym we've come to know as CNA. CNA stands for cerebral, nasty/physical, and aggressive. The reason it's nasty/physical is I just did not like how CPA rolled off. I liked CNA. I felt if I said CPA, somebody was going to think I'm sliding them a craft beer, and I don't want to promote alcoholism. So our cerebral, we're going to use our knowledge of the angles of football coupled with knowing what half of the defender to attack and what they like to do in certain situations to outsmart and beat them on the field. Simply put, we're going to be smarter than you about what we're doing. And we're going to be smarter than you on the field. Our nasty or physical. From the start of the play to the echo of the whistle, we want to be we want to be nasty physical with you. At the end of the game, we win, we lose. The scoreboard is one thing, but if you were in the trenches, you were in the jungle, as I like to affectionately call it with us, you're going to know you were in a war. Not a fight, but a war. You're not walking out of that thing the same way. You're going to leave us with respect because you know we punched you in the mouth for however long we were allowed to with the clock. And aggressive. We're not going to wait to start a war. That's what I always tell my guys. Half of my family lineage, I'm Greek. So I subscribe to the idea of the Alpha, the Omega. So in other words, I tell my guys, we're the alpha, we're the omega. We start it, we finish it. Every time with no exception. All right. Our philosophy within our own meeting rooms. Okay. Our universal requirements. Universal means me and the guys. Now, whether that's our own personal meetings that we have, whether that's a team meeting or an offensive meeting, first off, we're all going to observe the boat rule. All right. We're all in this boat together. Balanced, open, available, truthful, and trusting. How we sit in the meeting room is important to me. So that first row is going to be our starting five. Second row, they're backups. Third row, if you're fortunate enough to have a third row, it's going to be your third string guys. The way I normally do it, from left to right, left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle, and keep rolling. Me as a coach, if we have 3 solid rows, so that means I got 15 offensive linemen, I'm the fourth row sitting right behind them. If not, I'll usually be in the third row, whichever seat's open. Or in the second row if it's a down year and I don't got a lot of linemen. I'm in the second row. All right? My requirements of my players for every meeting they walk into. First off, they're going to arrive a minimum of 5 minutes before meeting is supposed to start. Growing up in football, almost all of my coaches subscribe to Lombardi time, which for those of us that don't know Lombardi time, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're 5 minutes late. So that's how I have them approach the game. There's supplies that they got to have with them. Hey, it's just like school. Got to have paper, a notebook, a notepad to write on. They need to have a pen or pencil for taking notes. And depending on your personal situation or where you're at, I know for me, I like for my kids to always have their playbook with them. So there's no reason that we can't reference something if we ever have a question. All right. Now, I've been in situations before coaching where the kids I had did not have a lot. So what I did was I always would go to Dollar Store or Walmart or Harris Teeter that sold cheap pads of paper and cheap packs of pens, and I'd have them with me. So if one of my guys didn't have it for some reason, or one of my guys couldn't afford it, I got it for him. Because again, I'm going to spend $5-6. Okay, it's not the end of the world. Now my kid's prepared. That's teaching that kid a life lesson for something after football. You've got to be prepared and you got to figure it out. All right. So my kids and the attitude. A lot of things happen in the world, man. Life is not just football. We're obviously experiencing that now. So first thing we're always going to do for my athletes, leave your issues at the door. Focus on getting better by learning from the film. Like we talk about that C and CNA, being cerebral. You can always learn something from film. Always have questions to ask to better yourself. Going back to the principle of nobody's perfect, this is a great situation where nobody's perfect. You can always find a question to get better. I tell people all the time, there's no such thing as stupid questions. Okay? Because there really isn't. Because if you feel you need to ask that question, you need to ask it because you need that clarification on it. So there are no stupid questions, just people too afraid to get the clarification. All right, just like I require my kids, certain things of my kids in meetings, no matter what meeting is, I'm going to require the same things out of myself. So my requirements, my arrival time, for the most part, I'm always at least 30 minutes early to a meeting. This allows me to get situated, go over what I want to do. And also it's where I sometimes brainstorm last minute things and like, hey, let's make sure we hit this. Supplies. I'm always going to have notes generated from previous practice or game film so that when we're in the meeting room, I'm not having to remember everything from the previous night. It's, hey, right here. Okay, I noted this so we can talk about it. Hey, Billy, right here, you notice your movement's incorrect. You went lateral where you should have gained ground. Stuff like that. I'm always going to have a plan of attack of what clips and things I'll want to go over. Again, just like having the notes of what we need to correct, on that same notepad, I'm going to have, all right, we need to go see clip here, see the clip over here. We need to see this. This is how we're going to attack it. So that we can try to bring everything together and make it a continuous stream of thought. I'm always going to have my playbook available as a reference as well. Again, like I told you, I'm not perfect. There are times I forget things. Currently at Becker, I'm relearning wing T, which is a system I haven't been in since my freshman year in high school. So I'm having to relearn wing T. So you better believe when I'm in meetings with my O-line, I've got my playbook open so that I can reference the play to make sure I'm teaching them correctly. Because the last thing I want to do is tell them how to block belly, and I haven't told them how to block it correctly. Our attitude for myself, just like the kids, I want to leave my issues at the door. Things that are not football related when we go into a meeting need to be left at the door. Just like we got to leave them before we get onto a field. Something that I noticed a lot at the high school level, and it's something that I try to avoid. Don't be evil when correcting athletes on film. I had coaches that were that way. College could be a bloodbath some days if you did something wrong. But if you really want the kid to learn from their mistakes, you're not evil with them. You say, hey, you messed up, but this is how you messed up, and this is how we make it better. Not dag nabbit, Sam Hell, son, you can't get nothing right. You got 2 left feet, none of that nonsense. Last thing, my attitude, I'm going to try to find some ways to bring fun and enjoyment to a meeting, because let's face it, sometimes in meetings, it can get monotonous, it can get boring. It's life, baby. So you got to find ways for the kids to have fun, because at the end of the day, sometimes we all lose sight of the fact that this is a game. We are supposed to have fun. These kids are supposed to have fun. Yes, we as coaches make part of or all of our living off of this, but for them, it's a game. Let them enjoy it. So that ends our philosophy for O-line that I subscribe to and that I try to build. Next, we're going to move to our O-line fundamentals. Guys, just so you know, fundamentals to me are things you have to do every day because they're skills. A quote that I heard once that really resonated with me, everything within the world of offensive line play is a skill, and skills are things we learn. So anything that doesn't come natural to us is a skill. So if we don't sharpen that skill, if we don't try to get that skill better every day, that skill diminishes, and diminishes with the snap of a finger speed. So the fundamentals, the things that if you ever came out to a practice I ran, whether we're a practice I'm in, whether we're in spring ball, fall camp, regular season, postseason, you're going to see my offensive line work the following 4 things every day: stance, starts, striking, fit, and finish. Our first piece is our stance. Okay. With our stance, the basic things that I like to instill with my guys to understand is our stance is a weapon. And arguably, it's the number 1 used weapon of an offensive lineman. And a lot of people don't realize that. We focus so hard on double teams and pulling and, bucket steps and all these crazy things. But the one thing we barely ever focus on is our stance. And what's the one thing an offensive lineman does every single play? Gets in the stance. So that's a weapon. That's a tool. That's a skill we use that we have to keep sharp. So we have to start with our stance. Another piece of it, too, is 90% of shortcomings or inabilities of our offensive linemen to not execute what we need on a play stem from they're in an incorrect stance. So what I want to focus on when I'm helping these kids build the stance is twofold. The first fold of it is we're going to create a coil. We have to prime our lower and upper bodies to be fully engaged in our stance. A lot of people don't focus on that. I do. The reason being, if I'm going to go into a boxing match or I'm going to go into a fight, which is what O-line play is in the trench, is a fight, why am I not going to prime my body and get ready for it? To prime our bodies to create that coil, we want to build our 345s. We want to put our body into optimal position to prime. We want to put ourselves in an optimal position to prime our bodies. A lot of times what I tell people is think about a coil or think about a spring, right? The spring without pressure is dormant and relaxed. When you compress the spring, once you let the spring go, what happens? It goes flying, man. That's the same thing. I want to create my offensive lineman to become a spring. Well, not necessarily a spring, but you get the metaphor. I want us to be primed, engaged, and ready to roll so that when that ball's snapped, it's just like taking your hand off a spring. We're going to let them shoot out and go crazy. Like I said, to do that, we create our 345s. These 345s are angles of our body. When we do something right, we could take, I think it's a protractor you can use, not a protractor, but one of the things you use to measure angles. You could put it at our ankle, our knee, and our waist, and you'll be at roughly a 45-degree angle. And you'll get a better visual of that as we go to the stance progression. I have a nice video to show everybody. Of course, when I did animation, the video cues first. I don't know why. I couldn't fix it. Oh. I apologize for the country twang in both my voice and the video. That's what happens when you grow up south of the Mason-Dixon line. It happens. But so in our stance, our progression getting into our stance is 4 to 5 pieces. 4 if you get into a 2-point, 5 if you get into a 3-point. The first part of this is our base. For my offensive line athletes, our base, our feet are going to be wider than the width of our shoulders. The reason being is I want to build a solid base. So if I were to walk up to the kid and push his upper body and he wasn't tense and he wasn't firm, his feet would not leave the ground. Now, how wide his feet are outside of his shoulders is going to vary between each athlete. And that's simply because we're all different shapes and sizes. What works for one kid is not going to work for the other. The only universal in our base is that our feet will be wider than the width of our shoulders. The second step in that progression is going to be our stagger and pigeon. With the stagger portion, depending on what side of the line, what side of the line of scrimmage the offensive lineman's on, that's the foot that will stagger. So if I'm on the right side, I'm in a right side stagger. If I'm on the left side, left guard, left tackle, I'm on the left side. My left foot is the stagger. Okay? Just like our base, how much stagger that offensive lineman's going to take, again, is going to depend on each individual athlete. Because, again, just like we talked about with base, no two O-line athletes are exactly the same. Their weight distribution is different. Their leg, one might have longer legs, one might have a longer torso. Again, athletes' physical makeup determines how wide past their shoulders the base is, how much of a stagger that guy needs to be in a comfortable position. Okay, when we pigeon that toe, we want to create a 45-degree angle. So if my toe is pointing straight forward, straight ahead, like on north on a compass, or pointing straight out to the side, 90 degrees, either east or west, depending on the side they're on, that's not a good thing. But somewhere in between there is the right pigeoning of that toe for that offensive line athlete to help them generate that 45-degree angle. The next piece we're going to do is we're going to learn to lock in the hips and lock in our body. when we do this process, what's going to happen is a couple of things. First, the main focus is that we're going to engage our adductor muscles, those interior leg muscles that we have. We're going to lock them in so that we can stabilize ourselves, okay, on our lower half. We want to prime our lower half. The other piece of it, too, is I want my guys to worry about keeping their weight on the inside halves of their feet. It's another reason that we're using these adductors to lock in. The fourth part is priming our body. This is when you prime your upper body, you're going to try to engage your back muscles with the intent to bring your shoulder blades slightly together. You're tensing, you're engaging those back muscles. Okay? And now the other part of priming the body is now we're going to start to bend both at the knees and the waist at the same time, not one then the other. They're going to bend at the same time. We're going to put our wrists on our thighs, and we're going to let our wrists naturally slide down our thighs until we get to our kneecaps. This will allow us to get our body to an optimal position. Now we're in a 2-point stance. And like I said, if you want to get in a 3-point stance, you go to number 5, whatever side of the ball you're on. So whichever side of your body has a stagger, that hand just drops straight into the ground. And again, we got a video. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, as you can see, the athletes are primed. They're in a very good stance, very actionable stance, and they're ready to go. Next part we talk about is our starts. Our basics. When we start, we understand that offensive linemen require power and agility. For O-line athletes to be at their best, we must combine the ability to be powerful and strong while also being agile and quick. The next piece we subscribe to within our basics is one of my personal favorite phrases: go own it. By subscribing to our 8 angles of movement, we want to own those angles. In other words, where we move on the field, we will always be dominant and in control. So if we know we're getting on a 45 angle, we're going to own that 45 angle. We're going to be in control of that 45 angle. We're going to dominate that 45 angle. So we are always looking for ways to generate optimal leverage against our defenders. So that brings us to the next piece. Like we talked about earlier, we're going to generate force through the ground. We're going to generate we're going to generate force for striking. We don't want to show up to a strike, to strike the defender with just our bench press max. I always tell the guys, I want to show up with some true force and power. I want to get my body momentum going in that direction. I want to get my squat involved. I want to get my deadlift, my cleans, my bench involved. To do that, I've got to propel. I've got to drive. I've got to go own that angle to do so. So I've really got to get my body moving. I always tell the kid, you want to hit them with your bench or you want to hit them with everything you got? Most kids and myself want to hit them with everything we got. So we want to create this by generating force through the ground. In other words, propelling, driving ourselves forward. We do this via our drive catch principle of movement, which is using our opposite leg to be the engine of our movement. The drills we use to achieve this and learn how to do this are ice skaters, kneeling starts, and stance starts, which we'll cover in our progression here real quickly. There's the videos. I think that's right. All right, cool. So our first progression that we go through with our guys, I like to affectionately call it ice skaters. Our point of emphasis here is we're learning how to drive catch. Most times the athletes I encounter for the first time have no clue about what I'm teaching, because what I teach is not necessarily the most orthodox thing within our profession. Driving off the opposite leg is a brand new principle of movement for them. This drill helps them learn the movement in a setting that is a lot easier than just throwing them in the fire and say, hey, get it right, or, be fifth string. Also, the other reason I like this is similar to track runners and speed skaters use the principle of driving off their opposite leg to generate force, movement, speed, and power as they work. So this is another reason I like this drill. It helps teach similar principles. Okay, again, the next part of it helps the kids start to learn the idea of generating power. In order to move themselves in this drill, they've got to drive off that opposite leg. So that means they've got to drive through the ground to create force to propel them forward. It's no longer about stepping. It's about driving through the ground with our opposite leg to generate that force and that movement. The next piece, by working off the inner halves of our feet, like we talked about in our stance, we're going to learn body control, which between driving off the inner halves of the feet and engaging our adductor muscles and sometimes our abductor muscles, we're creating stability. I want to keep our weight down the middle of our offensive line athletes so that if we ever do got to make sudden change of directions, it's a lot easier, it's a lot faster, it's a lot quicker. The reaction time is easier for the kid because, hey, all my weight's in the middle so I can go wherever I want. The thing I always teach kids is think about an 18-wheeler trying to make a tight turn. What happens to that 18-wheeler? It flips over. Or it runs over the telephone pole and we're without power for 5 hours. Because that vehicle is not designed to make tight turns. So we're trying to design and build a path, a movement, a way of moving these guys, these big athletes we have, so that they can do whatever is necessary. The last thing this drill teaches for our guys that they don't necessarily always know right away is teaching them to trust their body, to understand that A, they can do it, but B, it's a better process of movement for them. And again, the drill allows me to teach guys the process of drive catch a little bit easier, as well as it teaches them how to drive off the inner halves of their feet. Our videos, bear in mind with the videos, all three of those guys I either coached in high school or I personally trained them when they were in middle school. So these two were two high schools I worked at where I trained them. This one was a young man that I worked with at the middle school level and trained him. And again, it's nothing. Oh, sorry. Guy in the middle is the one I trained in middle school. High school guy when I worked with him. My fault, guys. But again, it's nothing crazy to it. It's nice and smooth. They're learning to trust their movement patterns that I'm teaching them. The second progression in here is our kneeling starts. With our kneeling starts, our points of emphasis, we're going to continue with what we did in our first progression. We're continuing the process of drive catch. We're going to continue the process of generating power by force through the ground. We're going to continue to focus on our body control. The only thing that changes in our second progression is now, instead of us being in a position that we're not going to be in unless we're in Chip Kelly's offense where he spreads out the whole daggone formation, is now the drill becomes a little bit more real for us, right? Offensive linemen are taught to be in a low position and we're supposed to strike and drive, right? Well, we're not in a stance. We're a little bit lower than our stance, but the concept of driving out the blocks and striking the guy is what's becoming more real than just the ice skater drill where we're standing up and just worried about learning the move. Learning the movement. The big thing, guys, for me, when I build progressions of things, I try to make it so that the only thing that's changing is how we're applying what we're doing. I want to keep everything else very similar and the same. It helps kids retain things a lot better, in my opinion. So that's us working our base angle, working north, base right or base left. EJ just finished up at NC State. He was doing this under Coach Ledford, who's now at the University of Louisville. He is an excellent offensive line coach, guys. You ever get the opportunity to watch him, listen to him speak, do it. He knows his stuff, man. All right, Zane right here is a guy I coached in high school. He's going into his second year at Elon. He's a good kid. He's taller now than he was back then. Again, working that same principle, just getting on a 45-degree angle. We use 45-degree angles for down blocks, for zone, so if we're gap scheme guys, that's a down block. If we're zone guys, that's inside zone, outside zone, getting on 45s. All right. Our third progression, guys, is going to be our stance progressions. Again, like we talked about, the only thing that changes is how we are doing the drill. We're not going to change our points of emphasis. We're just changing the application of it. Okay, so again, nothing changes. We're still doing our drive catch. We're still focused on generating power by force through the ground. We're still focused on body control. The only thing that's different, guys, is now it's the real deal. Now we're going to be in our stance, and now we're going to be working. Okay, just like we would in a game, right out of our stance. Just for anybody that watches this that's at the high school level, this is attainable by high school athletes. I use this with high school athletes. This isn't just a big man Division I college thing that can be done. All right. The principles of movement here can be applied to anybody, any level of athlete, any type of athlete, whether he's a D1 superstar, NFL guy, or he's the kid that probably should be your water boy. But you know what? He's got to be your starting right guard on Friday. Anybody can do these things. All right, so now we move on to our striking. Striking is fun. Everybody loves striking, right? Everybody loves to hit people. I know I did. It's one of the reasons I like football so much. The basics we instill in our guys is very similar in comparison as we were talking earlier about our stance and our starts. We're all building towards the strike. We're all building towards that first big payoff moment, okay? So the first basic that we focus on with the guys is our strikes start from the ground and work their way up. A great strike has power and force that is generated from the ground up through our body. We teach this to occur because we put our body in an optimal leverage point. So again, we talk about priming our body in our stance. We talk about generating force through the ground, driving off the opposite leg. All these things we're doing because we want to build that power so that we're bringing power from our feet all the way up through our body into the defender. Fun thing I always like to tell my guys, think about it like this. It's the closest you're ever going to get to being a Dragon Ball Z character. Throwing that fireball, Kamehameha, whatever they call it. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I watched Dragon Ball Z, man. I missed that show. All right. Second thing we talk about with this is ready or not. Okay. And again, this goes back to some of the points we just talked about. If we don't have our body ready to strike or absorb a blow, if it's a strike, it's because we're in run game. If we're trying to absorb blows or absorb pressure, it's because we're in pass. If we don't have our body ready to handle that, our body is not going to handle that. One thing I always talk about with kids at this point is fight or flight. It's the body's natural response system. If our body's not ready to take a blow, normally we're getting knocked back and we look stupid. Or if our body's not ready to deliver a blow, it's not going to be very strong. And what was the point of us getting to there if we're not going to be physical on impact? The next thing we like to focus with our guys in our basics is hands or palms. I've watched a lot of different ways to teach punches, guys. The one I subscribe to is simply put, what is the strongest point on my hand? And as y'all can see, I got bigger hands, but it don't matter how big your hand is your palm. This thing is padded. It is meant for you to strike with. It is meant for you to pop somebody with the palm of your hand, not your fingers. Your fingers are mainly there to grab on to whatever the hell you just hit with the palm of your hand. So my theory, and I tell my guys, is this: if my palm's the most padded part of my hand, why not use it? Why not use that as the strike? Why not use that to strike? The last thing we talk, second to last thing we talk about, the palm is the strongest part of your hand, so why not strike with it? The last thing we talk about when we talk about the basics of our striking is this: striking is more than just a double two hands at the same time. Offensive line athletes need to be able to execute both bilateral and unilateral strikes. So in other words, I can strike you with both hands at the same time, or I can use my left or my right. And any kind of combination, depending on A, the run play you're doing, or B, what situation you're in and what passing situation you're in. The drills we like to focus on within striking, the one we'll go over today is our basic mechanics, which is a double-handed strike. But other things that we work on is our reach work, is the drill I like to call it. And that's another thing within run blocking where we work on using our unilateral strikes when we're trying to execute reach blocks on 45-degree angles. And then the fishing game, or fishing as I like to tell the guys in Pass Pro. It's where we learn how to use jabs and use one-hand strikes to learn how to force the defender to show his move early so that we can really lock on and keep him from being effective in Pass Pro. If you guys reach out to me, I'll be more happy to go in depth about both of those. But that's why I had the asterisk on them, because I don't have the video of them right now. But I'll be happy to go into it with depth. So our mechanics are what we're here to talk about now in terms of striking, how to build a proper strike. And the nice thing about it, guys, is this: when you teach the kids how to properly strike with two hands, they're going to know then how to unilaterally strike with just one hand later on, because you're building the framework for it by teaching them how to strike with two hands. Because nothing should change between two hands strikes and one hand strikes. All right, so the way I look at it is this: our lower half has to be properly engaged. We've been focusing on this since we got into our stance, so there's no point to abandon this right now just because we're about to hit somebody. We're going to make sure we have our proper leverage points for our body using our 345-degree angles. We're working off the inner halves of our feet along with engaging our leg stabilizing muscles, those adductors and abductors, in order to have our weight down the center of us. The other piece to it too, guys, is when we're in an optimal leverage position or proper leverage position, we can transfer all the weight all the power that we've generated from movement and momentum. We can now start the process of transferring it, which brings me to power generation. We've been using the drive catch principle to generate force and power by driving through the ground. All right. So again, like I talked about, taking that momentum we've been building and transferring it through our body by engaging our lower half and being in a proper leverage position. By doing that, we're creating something that's more than a jab. All right. This now allows us the opportunity to include the strongest parts of our body in the strike. Like we talked about earlier, you bring power from the ground up. So again, that's why we focus on this. We want to engage our core and our chain of command. Our core engagement, that means flexing those abs. Not every offensive lineman has abs. We all do. Just for some of us, it's in the back of the refrigerator behind the keg, as my coach used to say. All right. But by engaging the core, we're allowing ourselves to transfer that force and power that we've been building in the lower half. We're allowing it to transfer from the lower body to bring it to our upper body. Okay. Chain. All right. Now, locking in the chain or chain locked in. Now, this part, I always tell people is one of the funnest things I'll ever teach, because I see people tell them to punch straight out, thumbs pointing towards each other. I see people trying to tell people punch them with their thumbs up. In both those situations, you'll then hear same coaches then talk about, oh, you got to get your elbows inside and then you got to roll your hips. Well, so what you're now telling me is I've got to hit somebody, I've got to lock out, then I got to get my elbows inside, then I got to roll my hips. That's a lot of coaching points when we're trying to let these kids be physical and be athletes. So how we lock the chain of command in is this. I want to get those thumbs to rotate outward so that when I'm locked in, my thumbs are going to be pointing outside, pointing away from each other. That's presenting my palms, which is where I want to be for my strike. But I want you guys to try this at home when you watch this. Take your hands like so and rotate your thumbs out and notice what now naturally happens with your body. The first thing you should notice, your elbow is naturally going to tuck itself in. So now I don't got to coach the kid about his elbows. Your biceps going to fire a little bit. That's going to help your elbow contract so you're in a prime position. So you're not too far extended, but you're not too far close. You're in an optimal position. The next thing you should feel, if you rotate and your thumb's going outward now, you're going to feel your shoulders screw in. What's beautiful about that is now your shoulder is in a safe place, right? Something that a lot of offensive linemen deal with injury-wise. AC joint sprains in their shoulders, AC ligament problems, things like that, because when we strike, we're usually loose. My shoulder's screwed in. My shoulder's in a safe position. I'm now in an optimal position. The last thing you should feel, you're going to feel your pectoral muscle fire a little bit. All that is doing, guys, is you're locking in your chain of command. You're telling your body, hey, we're about to do something here, so we need to put my body needs to put me in a position to A, be safe, but B, be able to either deliver a blow or absorb a blow and not be in trouble. All right, by locking in our chain of command, we're also allowing the transfer of that force that we generated from the lower half, that we transferred to our core. Now we're transferring it through our upper body again, just like being a Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball Z, baby. Now we're letting that fireball out. I don't know. Is it a fireball? It might be. Okay. Again, it's been a while since I watched that one, but the kids always know what I'm talking about. God bless their soul. All right. By locking in the chain of command, our hands are in a prime position, ready to go. Our hands, because now we're going to deliver our blow with our palms and not worry about jamming our fingers and messing us up. Also, too, when we lock in the chain of command, that final step, we're allowed to go straight to the point because we're going to deliver uppercuts. Again, I don't subscribe to this. This is passive. This is push them away. When you see that crossing guard with the big stop sign in the school zone, he's holding the sign, he puts his hand like this. Why? Because if that car is coming at him, does he have a chance to stop that car? No. So he's saying, please, God, don't hit me, see the sign. Let the kids live. That's how I always tell my guys. But if we're engaged in here, my body knows it's time to attack, and we can deliver an uppercut fashion, which will then help us alleviate a coaching point that you hear all across the country, which is roll your hips. Because you'll see in this video, again, this is a high school kid that demonstrated this part of the video. The hip roll will come naturally with movement if we lock in our chain of command. The last thing, to or through the defender. A lot of people focus on all this stuff and reach for your gun, stuff like that. The issue that runs into play is you start moving parts of your body one direction while the rest of your body's trying to go another. It's counterproductive. We want to strike through him. So by generating force and power through the ground, we're going to strike through our target because we're eliminating unnecessary movements. So again, this is, a high school kid. He's going into his junior year of high school this year, assuming we have football because of the pandemic. Again, you notice what naturally comes with that strike: power, hips, body's in a good position. The one thing I tell him, he can maybe rotate those hands out a little bit more. The other piece too that I neglected to cover is notice I don't want him to worry about how tight together his hands get. I want his hands to work within the natural frame of his body. Because our hands get too tight together, defender can then knock our hands free and get to the ball. Or because our hands get together, our elbows flare out, we get called for a holding penalty. And then little Johnny just made that huge run, comes back. Mom's yelling at you, coach is cussing at you. You come off the field, it's not good. All right. So our fit and our finish. So stance, starts, and striking are the first half of our process. Fit and finish is the end. Fit and finish is the second half. All right. A lot of times, this is where you see a lot of people do the most amount of analyzing what went wrong is in the last part of the block, when really sometimes, well, not sometimes, most times you got to look at what happened leading up to that block that caused it. We subscribe to the KISS method. I want to keep it simple, stupid for my kids. All right. Once we're engaged with a defender, I want you to feel his pressure and react to that pressure. So, and I say that to say this, guys, I'm an O-line guy. I love pancake blocks. It used to be my favorite thing. We all did it. We looked at the film. Oh yeah, I think there's a guy somewhere in the South that gives his kids shots of syrup when they pancake someone on the field, and that's awesome. And I'm not telling you not to tell your kids to pancake somebody. But me personally, I teach my O-linemen, I value movement off the ball. If I can get all 5 of my linemen to reestablish the line of scrimmage 2, 3, 4, 5 yards into the defensive side of the ball, that means my running back's first cut is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. That means we're not losing yards. There's no chance of losing yards on that play. That's the ultimate victory for me. When I grade out my linemen, I give them 10 points if they put someone in the ground. I give them 20 points if they can move a guy on any given play 5 yards or more off the ball. I'll give them 20 points when I grade them out. The drills we use to work this is our pressure field drill. We also have a replacement drill, just like the last drills. If you ever want to talk about that, hit me up. I'll be glad to go through it with you. Again, with the videos, I'm believe it or not, this is probably one of the best animation jobs I've ever done with bringing them in. I'm still getting better at that PowerPoint, that part of PowerPoint. The pressure field drill, the points of emphasis, just like everything else, I want to keep my body engaged. It's my lower half, my upper half. Okay? We engage with the defender before we start this drill. Because this process starts after our strike, we need to work on it post-strike. So when we run these drills, I have my guys fit up into the bag or fit up in the defender. We're going to fight pressure with pressure. The drill starts with the O-line athlete driving the track forward. Then the defender works on changing directions. The O-line athlete's job is to feel that pressure going somewhere else and react properly by applying the block in the new direction. So again, that's EJ. Just work on staying with them and moving them. Because at the end of the day, guys, once we hit that defender, it's not freeze tag where he's going to stop, right? You hit him, he's going to try to get off that block and get to the ball. So it's our job to make sure we can stay with him. Guys, I appreciate you. sitting through this. Again, my contact information is right here for y'all. If you guys have any questions at any time, I am always available. I love talking football. I love chopping it up. I believe that we can always learn from one another. You can learn from me. You might have something that I'm like, hey, I need to look at doing that. The last piece I'll say is this: a huge learning tool for me has been the work that OLP does out in Arizona. It was founded by a gentleman by the name of LaCharles Bentley. He was a former Ohio State standout offensive lineman. He played in the NFL for a number of years, Saints and the Browns, if I remember correctly. The stuff that he puts out for offensive line play is second to none. It is incredible. Like I feel I have a solid knowledge base of offensive line play through my experience in coaching. That man easily dwarfs everything I know. So I love going to his website and checking it out. It is subscription based, but for $9.99 a month, you cannot beat the video content he puts out there about O-line play. If you don't want to look for O-line play, but you're looking for ideas about building your athlete's strength or helping their nutrition, things like that, his website also produces that content as well. It is a wonderful learning tool. Not to mention, if you follow him on Twitter, guys like that work there, like CJ and Brian and them, they will always answer questions for you. They are about the continued growth and learning process of this game, just like I am. So thank you very much for having me on, Coach.